right now, Kushner and Witkoff, and I believe meeting with Russia and Ukraine. But what do you see happening on the ground? I just feel like there's a shift in the whole geopolitical scene happening right now. What say you?
Yeah, I think your gut is correct. It's definitely, it seems like Trump is definitely getting a realistic, logic-based view of what's happening. And of course, it's so in your face now, seeing, because we're talking with two parties and the trilateral talks just started again in Geneva about an hour ago. The Russians arrived an hour ago, Ukrainians about a half hour ago. So the Ukrainians, Russians, and US are in the middle of those talks. But meanwhile, just as we've been reporting in all these last few weeks, the Europeans just continue with the controlled mantras, repetitive, keep going, we can do this, we have the money, the threat is real. And when you just see that, and they're whispering into Zelensky's ear, and Zelensky's already backed into a corner. He really doesn't have any options because he knows he will not be leading Ukraine if Ukraine signs a peace talk. It's this catch-22, and it would be frustrating, except it's so in your face. They're actually criticizing Trump now openly. We're going to show some of Macron's words here. So, it's to say depressing, I guess, would be one way to put it. But again, I think, as we've said before, historians are going to look at this and just look, especially at these EU leaders who are going out of their way to keep this war going against the will of their own people, against obviously the will of the Ukrainian people, and men just keep dying in droves, which we can't talk about enough because that's the real issue here, and people need to constantly wrap their hands around it. Thousands of men are dying for no reason. Good men, and many of them, again, as we'll see in a few minutes, are being dragged into the combat zone only to die these horrific frozen deaths on the battlefield.
Yeah, you're talking 30,000 a month. I mean, on one side, it's obscene, and why anyone would support this. And I'm in Texas right now on the road, and was talking to some military people here, and there's a lot of guys, I think, that thought they were doing the right thing and went over there and fought as mercenaries. And I think they're realizing that wasn't the right choice. And I read this morning there's F-16 pilots, Americans and Dutch, flying for Ukraine right now. I mean, to me, that's the wrong thing. What do you think about that?
Yeah, totally. And I've said it before. I don't know a single, and it's anecdotal, but I have a fairly wide colleague network. I don't know a single competent, meaning experienced, motivated, proved himself on battlefields before, who has gone over to fight in Ukraine. Most of what I have seen are guys who couldn't get into the military, or did not get in when they were of the right age, the U.S. military. I'm talking just specifically U.S. Individuals who participated. A few that were kicked out, the one drone guy, he's dead now, that actually did a bunch of podcast interviews. About halfway through the podcast, he said he would admit, I was dishonorably discharged for drugs or something. And they're trying to capture something. It's more personal than it is philosophical or principled. They're just trying to catch, this adventurer thing that you used to only be able to get from Soldier of Fortune magazine, reading about the guys, supposed guys all over the world. So, the majority of individuals who have gone over to the fight are not the types of guys you want, who are going to add value. And then the way they're treated, that's overwhelming. It's proven they just, to expect better treatment than the Ukrainians are getting would be
Yeah.
far-fetched, and they treat the Ukrainians like shit, the
Yeah.
basic, privates and sergeants and low-ranking officers. So they certainly are going to treat the mercenaries. And yeah, many of these guys, in addition to just the adventurer, were duped by this
Yeah.
global propaganda that again is hard to even fathom as it continues across the globe.
All right. Well, I've got a lot to go through here with you, so you just let me know when you want to start. But I
Yeah,
really
let's
want to
go
give
ahead.
people. Okay, I want to give people a bird's eye view of what's happening on the ground. So here we go.
Good. Yeah, so this just sums up what we were just saying. And you look at the 8 main leaders here, the coalition of the willing, along with Ursula von der Leyen, the head of the EU. And you can better understand, this is a good post, you can better understand what's happened. They've backed themselves into a corner. And, if you remember, we've talked about this. Their whole purpose was to bring down Putin from within
Mm-hmm.
by creating this proxy war that would put pressure on him from without, so that the people in Russia would rise up and overthrow Putin. Additionally, they somehow assumed that Russia's economy would break under the high intensity pressure of the military industrial complex and the requirements of that military industrial complex to somehow keep up with the mighty NATO military industrial complex. And they were wrong on all accounts. Russia became more independent of outside suppliers. While boosting its economy, the embargoes totally backfired. All those companies pulled out of Russia, were replaced with Russian companies, startups who saw a huge, you've got a ready-made market. Just look at Starbucks. Starbucks pulled out, and the Russian replacement now is making, printing money. Of course,
Mm-hmm.
you have all these businesses. You just go hang a similar sign, work hard, and you're gonna achieve the same thing. So, all their economic tactics misfired on them. And then in addition, you know, the EU itself is just sinking under the weight of its failed migration policies, which are creating massive social instability. We don't see a lot of it, but guys like you who travel over there
Yeah.
understand it. And the politicians just can't admit failure. So they double down on blaming Putin for everything.
Yeah.
And then what also shouldn't be misunderstood is this military industrial complex equation. Russia's is now humming at a level where they could actually fight a world war.
Mm-hmm.
Europe doesn't have one, and neither does Ukraine. Ukraine has almost nothing left. So there's no ability to produce weapons or reproduce them or regenerate weapons. And in Ukraine, it becomes less and less possible every single day because of the air attacks. So in total, Europe just can't admit defeat. It'd be political suicide. So they're doubling down. And as you're going to hear in a moment, some of those reasons are political, meaning, showing their true colors as globalists / Democrats. And
Yeah.
they recognize there's midterm elections in the U.S. You heard Gavin Newsom go to the Munich Security Conference and tell people Trump won't be here in 3 years. Well,
Yeah.
it's the end of his second tour. But what he's really saying is we're gonna, don't pay attention to these guys. We're gonna replace them. We're gonna have Democrats back in power, and the war will go on. And I believe that whispering in the
That's
ear
the
is
goal.
what's. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, hopefully Trump, but with all the election integrity stuff that's going on, that's a different subject. But
Yeah.
hopefully that solves a lot of that problem. But I was remiss, and I should have put this up first. This was on your list as the first one. So
Yeah, no, it's a good order to put it second because after Europe, then you have this. And This is at the Munich Security Conference. I'm not even going to say his name, the guy next to Zelensky, but Blumenthal is the other one. So you got a Republican and a Democrat. And they're once again whispering in Zelensky's ear. And just like, before the famous fight in the West Wing in February of 25, the Democrats got Zelensky first before the meeting in the White House, whispered in his ear. And I just, you can see them doing it right there. Zelensky's hands is around the shoulder there. And it's the same thing. You've got these people sabotaging the peace talks, and he's already obstinate enough. Zelensky, he already has zero motivation for the greater good of the people of Ukraine. And that's just an obvious fact by what he's done up to this point. But now you got these two telling him the same thing we heard Root say to the Rada last week. Hang in there, hang in till spring. And you can't come to any other conclusion than, it's the economic money laundering and the midterm elections in the U.S.
Well, there was an interesting article, and I can't verify it, but it was on Kim.com yesterday, who's put out some sensational stuff in the past. But he essentially said that Palantir was hacked and that they found out that they were working closely with the deep state to try to prolong the war until they could get their AI systems to a point where they could destroy a lot of Russian infrastructure in the next year and try to get Ukraine across the finish line. So that may be happening in the background. I don't know. But it's interesting, that they're trying to find ways to, and they've been somewhat effective. There was a massive drone strike last night into Russia. A lot of it was shot down. But they're still really working hard to keep this war going and to try to find some way to defeat the Russian Federation.
Yep, and that's one of the things they whisper in Zelensky's ear all the time. There's a new weapon system. It's almost perfected. If you remember, about a month ago, the Israelis launched their laser, their anti-drone, anti-aircraft laser, and it was supposed to be this game changer. And if you watched Zelensky in the weeks leading up to that, he said, something's coming, something big is coming, something's coming. Well, it hasn't changed anything. And the war it's not going to be won or lost just on what you can do with drones. The men on the ground are still the ones taking ground or holding that ground, and they're still what matters. These winter, has shown that drones have limitations, and many of these days here, they've not been able to fly or not been able to acquire targets due to the weather.
Here's your next slide.
Yeah, and so last week we showed Root in the Rada telling the Rada is the Ukrainian Congress, telling them, hang on, just can make it till spring. It's going to be warm. We've got this 20-point plan. It includes security guarantees. Well, Russia at the time had called it and said this is like a hybrid, fake plan that NATO and Zelensky have put together to show to Ukraine only. And the Russians were right. That 20-point plan has not been sent to Russia. And as far as I know, it hasn't been sent back to the US. And a lot of that's because Marco Rubio has been saying, we're not interested in talking about your plan. We've already agreed to one with Russia. So again, where physics, where reality meets propaganda fails every time.
Here's your next slide.
Yeah, just another, this is a guy from Estonia, breathing fire at Russia. He's a neighbor. And, there would be no other way these guys would be doing this unless someone was saying, hey, has really duped them into believing they can win this and that they just need to hold on and Russia will collapse.
Here we go.
Yeah, and then this is, a source in both Ukraine and Britain have confirmed this. Starmer promised new long-range missiles for deep strikes into Russia. And, this is where they say it again, partners insist on continuing the war to weaken Trump's position before the U.S. midterm. So Britain doesn't have any long-range Tomahawk-like missiles to give away, but these false promises do two things. They continue the propaganda war, and then they whisper false confidence into Zelensky's ear.
Mm-hmm. Well, Britain can't even defend itself, so it's amazing that they're sending everything they can to Ukraine. I still think that's intentional, a globalist ploy to destroy the whole, European defense capability and civilization. But
Yeah,
that's another subject. All right, let's
yeah.
get this one in.
Still despicable. Here's Rude again, and you see the messaging. This is why we show this. Russia will continue to be a long-term threat to NATO even after the conflict in Ukraine ends. In other words, if by some chance the U.S. and Russia are able to, and Ukraine meet an agreement and sign a peace treaty, we still need all this money for our military industrial complex. We've still already set up these deals. My cut is in there. Obviously, all these politicians have a cut in it. And they're just trying to propagate a threat that is not there. Russia has never said, never shown any indication. And if you think about Russia, where they appreciate their culture now more than they've probably ever appreciated it in the 20th century and the 21st. They don't want Nobody wants France, nobody wants Britain, nobody wants Germany as a satellite that they need to govern and take on the economic and social problems that those countries bring to the table. So it's just it doesn't hold any up to any scrutiny at all, but the propaganda continues.
Well, the issue, I mean, Rubio's speech in Munich was fantastic. I just found that really important. Again, a turning point where the Trump administration is calling out these European leaders for destroying their own society. So,
Yeah, and I think
of
that
that,
goes back to this. This is what you were talking about. You had an article on CDM about this. Trump stated it would be better for Kyiv to start showing more flexibility. And of course, they've look how much land, look how many of their greatest natural resource, their men, they've lost just since we've started this conversation in early 2025. You just go back to spring of 2025. We're almost a year, and he just keeps putting it off. It's same thing each time. If we're able to loop all the cuts together, we'd show him, we can do it. We can just hold out a little longer. We're not giving up terrain. And so this to me shows Trump is finally, advisors and logic have broken through and they understand the real dynamic of this
well,
battlefield.
that was 500,000 Ukrainians ago.
Yeah,
I
well,
mean
that's a
that's
great way to
just
put it. Great way to put
sickening.
it.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Here's the next slide.
Yeah, and this is Macron openly criticizing Trump. He's now dealing with the Trump administration, which is openly anti-European, shows contempt for the EU, and wants its divisions into parts. The EU should not feel safe, believing that U.S. tensions over Greenland and the trade war have passed. Europe has found itself in an emergency situation. And then this goes on to talk about, he says, and then we've got to start talking to Russia ourselves so we don't have to count on a third party, as he calls it. That's the US. And he adds no logic of why. He adds no, here's why we need to talk to Putin. We need to find peace. He just wants to take that over so that they don't lose the war to an outside individual, which is President Trump, who does not agree with their globalist ambitions. But of course, Macron is desperate men make desperate moves. He's maybe the most desperate of all of them. Everything's gone wrong for him. And like Starmer, his approval rate is in the low teens, which is unprecedented for any leader of either of those two countries in history. So, everything he can to continue the war, but openly talking hostilely toward Trump. And that's why I think in totality, when you see all this, I believe President Trump has gotten the message. There is against me is the Democratic Party in the US, and they're now working together with those same globalist Democrats to bring me down. And the one way
It's not even for the greater good of America, although it ends up being that. It's for the greater good of the world, and stopping a potential world war is he just needs to normalize relations. Peace treaty, forget about if the peace treaty breaks down here, forget about it, and sign a peace treaty with Russia, and with robust economic, military, and diplomatic ties, and that will finally put all of these individuals on the sideline.
Well, it is a fight for humanity. That is true. So here's the next slide.
Yep, keep going. We showed this one already.
Oh, sorry, I'm behind.
Yep, and this is just Britain. The British Defense Staff Air Chief Marshal Richard Naton and the General of the Bundeswehr just said, we're speaking as the voices of Europe, which now has to face the uncomfortable truths about its own security. Russia's military position has decisively shifted toward the West. Again, just 100% made up. These are military men. These are the top generals in these two countries, which, you know, is a common denominator we see across the globe, including the U.S. Just like when we had Biden in power, when these globalists are in power, they make sure that the head of the military has a similar worldview. And we had it with Miley and Austin under Biden. Britain's suffering, and so is Germany right now. These guys are out of their minds, and they're really compromising their integrity as military officers just by saying this.
You know, there was a British former officer, senior officer, who came out yesterday and said there is no way Britain will avoid a civil war now, because they have so many immigrants that if they try to start deporting them, there's going to be a war. And if they keep going the way they are, the heritage, you know, Britons are going to start a war, because they just can't suffer what they're doing to their raping their girls and killing, you know, and taking over their communities. And by the way, the call to prayer is in New York City now. So, you know, this is happening everywhere. We have to stand up and become men and defend our civilization and our culture. And that's essentially where we are. So I'll get off my soapbox, but here's your next slide. Okay.
Yeah, and this is Kostenko, who, you know, is the #2 man to Zelensky. And here he's an ultra-nationalist, Azov battalion guy. So, you know where he's coming from. He's fervently against ethnic Russians living and existing in Ukraine, in the territory of what's called Ukraine. And, you know, negotiations are currently not beneficial for Ukraine. If we hold out until spring, the situation will change. That's Zelensky's. He's in charge of drones. He's basically the ops guy in charge of Ukraine now. It's not Zelensky, but you're hearing it from the horse's mouth there. Hang on. This guy too doesn't care about Ukrainians, as I told you from his background. He's an ideology-driven guy, and it's an ideology that has never proved positive for any country or any people in the history of human beings.
All right, so let's move into some of the videos here on your list. This one is a recruiting video. I'll just play this, and then I'll go to the next one. You're ready?
Yep. Yeah, so, and here's why. So you had the guy who basically runs the military, runs the operation of the war. This is...
Вы что, блядь, охуели? Нахуй вы человека бьете?
And this is...
Нахуя вы человека бьете, блядь? Ебало свое завали, ты мне, блядь...
Thinking this guy's gonna
Будешь
fight
что-то
on the
пояснять, и
battlefield?
ты, блядь. Говно, иди пиздуй, воюй, блядь.
Я забыл там, блядь, иди нахуй.
Go ahead to the next one, Todd. We have a few folks, and it's because Ukraine came out in their propaganda media and said most of the videos of these forced recruitments are AI. Well, what happened in Ukraine was two individuals came out with multiple angle videos of the same thing and said you can't have AI that syncs from two angles, and showed it. And of course,
from the ground. I've had two individuals corroborate to me. It goes on all the time.
Yeah.
Usually they confiscate the cell phones, but in groups like that, where that was a bunch of women, they can't get all the cell phones. And now we've been hit with a tsunami of these. So go ahead, keep showing them. This is dragging a guy right out of his apartment. There's his trusty dog trying to fight him off. So you think that guy's going to fight? Think that guy's going to hold a position? Go ahead. You can keep going. We have a few of them. This is a tragic situation. This guy's a little overweight. You can't zoom in here. I did it. The guy in the background is kneeling on his back of his head, his medulla, and his face is crushed into the snow. Tragically, this guy dies. He's about to have a heart attack. They roll him over and he dies.
Hard to watch. Let's go to the next one.
And here we go again. Same thing. Dragging this guy out. Look at this woman. She's not just, fake fighting. She's fighting for her life. That's probably her husband. Look at the fight she puts up, right?
Yeah.
And this should tell everyone everything about any potential for Ukraine to turn things around. None of these are going to fight with any level of competence or credibility on the battlefield, and they should know that. But they just don't have the manpower, and they don't have the military-industrial complex to even consider them having a potential chance to turn this thing around in the coming months.
Here's Klitschko.
Yeah, and Klitschko, so the ex-boxing champ, for those who don't know, and he, throughout this, has been a single voice of reason that we've heard coming out of Ukraine. And, he says it with Kyiv, is almost, I think 10% of Kyiv has power, but people have fled. We reported last time 600,000 have already fled. But look what he says. Right now, the question of our country is our country's future. Whether we will survive as an independent country or not is still open. He's actually worried about his country and the people. To me, he was the right choice. If you go back to 2014, the intercepted and then published phone call between Victoria Nuland and Gregory Payet, the head of State Department and the ambassador to Ukraine, they vetoed Klitschko. They said he's not ready. And obviously they didn't like his resume. He didn't go to a international blue blood college. He's not ready. Let him go back and practice. That was the right man for the job in Ukraine back in 2014. He cares about the people. He cares about his country, and he has some semblance of logic that can view reality and make decisions. So
we have one more video.
Yep. And this just is from Russia. These are the body bags still piled up in Russia. Ukraine will not take them back. They want this, drip method where, they get 100 or 1,000 at a time. And we've reported on this before. Every time it's close to 39-1. The Russians, they'll only take 1,000. So the Russians give them 1,000 at a time. The Ukrainians give them back between 30 and 40 bodies, which is about the average they have each time. So disgusting. That for any Ukrainian to see those bodies laying there in a warehouse, again, those are sons, brothers, fathers, nephews, the whole deal. And no one should be treated like that. But he doesn't want to pay the families the death benefit because the coffers are empty due to graft and corruption.
Speaking of that.
Yep. So one more of Zelensky's number one advisors was arrested trying to flee the country. He too was on his way to Israel. And so, 100 million, a billion, all of Zelensky's advisors have now either been arrested, indicted, or kicked out of their jobs. All of his circle. How can they not think Zelensky deserves the same fate. And all you got to do is look at his bank accounts, but the West won't do that. And they're protecting him. He's the stooge that will do whatever they tell him, and so no matter what evidence comes up, he's going to stay president as long as they can hold him in there.
All right, last slide.
Yeah, I know this is just a closing. This is Phil Esposito, one of the greatest hockey players ever, and just makes this comment about national teams. I'd rather say this. It's a shame that the Russian Federation didn't get the right to play in the Olympic hockey tournament in Italy. And no matter what anyone says, it's an incomplete tournament if Russia doesn't participate in it. I didn't know that that somehow they kept the Russians out of this Olympic. So when I went the first day to look at the hockey bracket, I was like, where's Russia? How can they not have Russia in? And there's no Russian athletes. There's a few of them that are allowed to go neutral.
But they compete without their flag or something like that.
Right. What right does anyone have to not allow it? Just shows you how politicized the Olympics have become. And I don't think I've watched a single live event. No. I won't watch the hockey. Now it's once again the U.S., Sweden, and Canada, and that's it. And you got the best team in the world left out.
Ever since they went to the 2-year cycle, I stopped watching because it used to be a big deal. Every 4 years, you had the Winter and Summer Olympics, and it was done for monetary or globalist reasons. I mean, they destroyed that institution too, because it was good. I think it was good for humanity. You have peaceful competition, no matter if there's a war or whatever, and they've destroyed that, I think, on purpose.
Well, and look, it's the same illogic that think about if it was applied to the U.S. We have athletes who have already come on and used the Olympic soapbox to criticize ICE. And of course, they were resoundingly counter-criticized for it. But it just shows you athletes are not the government of the country. They're athletes. And the spirit of the Olympics is amateur athletes, which even makes it more pronounced. They have one shot, and at their age for their sport. And you're denying it because of your own political prejudices. And to me, this is a travesty of these Olympics that Russia's not participating.
Well, Pete, that's all I got. Really insightful information. We'll be reporting on CDM on what happens in Switzerland, and hopefully we'll get some progress in this whole thing. Anything else you want to bring out?
Nope, that's it. You have a great day, Todd.
All right, take care. We'll see you after this break back on the Skiff.